Welcome to the Rescape podcast, where we explore the value of play. In this episode, I talk to Almog Loven, professional dancer, teacher, and therapist from Israel. As well as being a practitioner and movement teacher of the Ilan Lev Method, Almog holds a degree in psychology and humanities from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. His research has looked at the impact of psychological flexibility on chronic pain. Without further ado, Almog Loven.
Come here. Growing up in Israel.
Yes.
And dancing.
Yes.
Were you always dancing?
Since I am 8 years old.
Go away. Is there a culture in your hometown conducive of a lad like yourself engaging in dance so openly?
So, well, the way I have been living my life so far is I live through necessities. So say I started when I was 6 years old. I went to handball practice. I started from playing handball. And then my family moved. My father was a doctor and he moved to another hospital. And in the new village, there was no handball practice. So I looked for something nice to do, and there was tap dancing. And in the old city where I was until I was 8, there was tap dancing only for kids from 9 years old and older. So as there was no handball, but there was tapping, I said, okay, so let's do tap. And then I fell in love and I started doing ballet and modern jazz and hip hop and all sorts of other things. And it fulfilled me until it stopped fulfilling me. So I went to study psychology. And yeah, it's out of, there is a certain need for something, and I start working in a certain path. I'm not sure where exactly it will lead me.
Mm-hmm.
And when something else becomes more relevant or another need becomes more dominant, I listen to that.
I actually didn't know that you went and studied psychology. I had taken you for an intuitive dancer the whole way up.
Yeah. Look, actually, it's people that lead me. I found people that were passionate about dance, and that inspired me. I found passion in myself also. And later on, when the passion subsided a bit, I found that I'm much more passionate about talking with people that are interested in the psyche and other mechanisms of how pain is integrated into psychological systems, how it's induced by our thoughts. So then I found myself in university with people that have very wide horizons and are very interesting to talk to, but are somewhat disconnected from their bodies. So as I came from the realm of dancing and living through my body every day, then suddenly disconnecting and just being a resident in my head felt strange and very dissatisfying.
Mm-hmm.
So I came back to the world of dance more as a teacher, and I lead workshops, but I'm mostly interested in the space that allows for body, spirit, mind, whatever you wish to call it, to be integrated again and not remembered as sub-parts of something, but really experienced as a whole.
That's so interesting, man. That's so good. Okay, this could be a long conversation already. There's a ton of questions coming to me.
Yeah.
So I know that this workshop that you do, it's called Weightlessness. That's the one I'm aware of. Is there more workshops with different titles, or is this pretty much the center of your traveling work?
This is it mainly.
Yeah.
But I should say no workshop resembles another.
Yeah, I appreciate that 100%.
So as I said about me finding interest in people that are passionate about what they do, the workshop really forms through the people that appear. So whoever comes, it's funny to explain what happens in the workshop because you happen in the workshop. We happen in the workshop. So I create settings for us to show who and what we are. And primarily what's most fascinating for me is to show which parts we hide, and to create a space where it's impossible to hide this anymore. And then it becomes clear that this is not only not serving us, but actually holding us back. And then when these parts of us that we are ashamed of or feel should be hidden or overpowered by another stronger sides of us. So when these places have room to show, we just feel very different than we do. And then it really doesn't matter what I choose to do later on in the workshop. It's just when you're communicating from that place, it becomes very evident that many of the things that we would usually blame others for or think we cannot do and therefore need to, I don't know, strengthen something. It's just our insecurities. And when they have space to be, then they feel much better.
Right on, man. That sounds so good. Okay. So you're saying that you're allowing for, like you're creating a space in which people, their insecurities, or what you're referring to as what we hide, are given permission to be exposed, perhaps. When are we talking? I think you're talking about, like you suggested, body, mind, and spirit. So, like perhaps a particular body part is closed off, or a part of the body, but perhaps also a part of the body is closed off, but it's actually more a thinking or a view of self is closed off, perhaps.
Absolutely.
Are you provoking this permission to occupy this space through language, through your movement, a combination of both? Can you speak a bit more about that?
Sure. So I try to use language as little as possible.
As little as possible.
Yes.
Okay.
It's really all in the body, and the way I see. Of course, we also hear how people are expressing themselves, and that's part of the expression. But it's very evident to me that the body doesn't lie. The body really reveals everything. So also when someone is trying to hide something, I can see very clearly what they're trying to hide through their bodies. But what is important for me is that for me as a teacher to know that what I see is irrelevant for the student. What matters is what they experience in their own body. So I create a physical scenario in which, say, we hold hands and you're asked to take me. But I would only come if you really take me. If there is hesitation in your proposition, then I will not come. If you have excessive force in your proposition, then I will fall on you, and it will be clear that this is not serving any of us. But if you will just trust that you can take me by simply being you, then this will work. And at first, this makes no sense. And also now, as I'm verbalizing it, it's like, perhaps you can imagine it as one thing, or you can imagine it as another. I turn it into a very physical and practical, simplicity is really key here. A simple task. And then it becomes evident that we overcomplicate everything. So from the simplicity that is at first maddening, because it's like, what is this workshop? We're doing nothing. Things that are superfluous start to fall off, and that's where the weightlessness comes to be. But again, I don't speak of weightlessness. I hardly speak of anything. It's really just moving from one practical thing to another. And sometimes I ask people, what did you experience? Because what you experience is what matters, and this is what will dictate where we will go next. Perhaps another key element is that I constantly break structure in what I propose. Because if I knew how the workshop would be before you arrived, it means your part in the workshop is very insignificant. It's like you could be replaced by someone else. And that's not what I experience when I meet people. I meet someone and I only meet them, and I try to be present in the conversation to an extent that is really a conversation I could only have with you, Robbie, right now, not something I could speak with another host about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important for me that I aim to meet you and that I'm open to receive what you're proposing me at this moment, and not based on my experience from five. It's who I am right now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'm taking it far away from your question.
No, not at all. It's making it very clear. In fact, you saying that you use little language is interesting to me. I suppose in a way you're speaking through the doing in the practice itself. I find that language is an interesting topic in and of itself when it comes to looking for people to move in a particular way. The language itself is subject to interpretation, and then who knows what comes about. Whereas if you're proposing tasks like you're suggesting there, it can be a bit more predictable for an outcome that's of your desire. And maybe I'll pick up something more on that in a minute. I'd like to stay with the workshop, the weightlessness concept, because I love the name weightlessness. And so then I am presuming that there is a weight that we'd like to shift. And then I'm wondering, what is this weight?
That's a brilliant question. It is everything. It's anything that you've experienced through your life that you're still hanging on to, and therefore it's keeping you afloat. You know very well how, I forget the name now, but the power that you imply on earth is the power that you receive back, right? The counter reaction force or something like that. And the reality is that very few of us really give our entire weight to the ground. Some of us try to push ourselves down to spring back up, but that's really unnecessary. So what I find is that by finding every day new, because it's really an ongoing practice, what is it that I'm not giving space to fall, to really feel the weight of my being? That is what is keeping me afloat, and that is what is preventing me from receiving the only support that I need to feel that I'm sufficient. So, and again, this can sound spiritual or theoretical, but it's very, very practical.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really astonishing how through very simple and honest physical communication, you can feel yourself so much more present. And look, it's not a coincidence that we doubt if we are enough, because we do not receive the feedback from the ground of our whole being. We keep ourselves a little bit away from feeling our full weight. So through teaching and communicating, also treating, I keep looking for what is it that I'm holding back from this conversation now. And when I let that be, really nothing else is needed. So it's not, okay, I'll make a side note about what I found in dance. It was never for me the appearance, and it was never the tricks or even the beauty of it, the visual beauty. The only thing I ever cared about was the experience of myself through dancing. It was the one time, especially as I started as a kid, that I didn't doubt myself, that I could really love everything about me in that body. And as I grew up and complexities entered my life, or I became, maybe I complicated my life, it doesn't matter, but the fact that I experienced my life as complicated, the less I could feel this joy of being, this joy of, I have no doubt that this moment is as it should be, as it must be.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, it's the experience of things that I care about. So a person could weigh 200 kilos, but still experience themselves as right for what they are right now. I thought last night, actually, I saw an old man, and I thought, like, I could really not imagine how this man was when he was younger. And I feel no need to. You know, it's like this person is right for what he is right now. I have this, like sometimes I see people that would like to be somewhere or someone else. And I know for a fact that this will bring them no joy. And it was quite early in my, through my education, when I found that teachers are inadvertently trying to teach me how to be them, that I was like, dear sir, you are not happy with yourself. Why are you trying to get me there? So from when I started teaching, I was like, okay, I don't want to teach people to be like me. I don't want to teach anyone to move like me, because even when I move in a way that people perhaps admire or find inspiration in, if I question myself, that is not what I want to share. That is not the way I wish to inspire. So I say, okay, I bring myself as I am to this conversation, to this day, to my workshop, to a treatment. And in that, I wish to be content with all the complexities that I see. And somehow something trickles and I can find myself much more grounded, and yeah, content is a good word.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps it's the one last thing I'll say about this is that it is always, contentment is always now. And I say that I think trying to find a state of being content, a prolonged state, is misleading. And I feel that many practices try to aim there, because that's a falsehood. You can be content now, and that's it. And you can be content now, and that's it. It's the accumulation of these very small fragments of now that I'm content that are everything.
Right on. I'd imagine that takes practice to go from these now moments of contentment, rather than I'm going to go and I've scheduled my contentment for in an hour from now, but until then I'll continue with my suffering. I'm looking forward to being content. But I'd imagine that there is the necessity to practice, like you're dancing since 8, because primarily of the joyous experience, or perhaps the peace it brings you. So you're coming at it from the Almog experience, and I can see how it can be, perhaps, but probably not, because you're probably the most peaceful person I've ever met. An element of frustration, or perhaps a desire for someone you could care about to also experience this consistency in contentment.
No, wait, but I have to pause you on that, because this is, so say the side of me that I show is what you experience as being very calm. But man, I've had such hits of despair also when this is the part of me that I was able to show this relaxed, pleasant vibe. And what it created in me oftentimes is the feeling that I'm not being fully seen. Because people say, hey, you're so nice and so hugging and so embracing, and I can feel like, nothing will shatter this calmness. But it takes real courage and feeling of safety for me to show also the sides of me that are a complete mess. And what I'm interested in is to find in every conversation a way for these sides to be seen as well. I'm not trying to be calm. It's just the way that my personality designed to protect me. So say in a recent relationship I was in, and we broke up 6 months ago, but this amazing woman, she made me, man, cry like I never cried and angry like I never was. And I really appreciated that, because it's sides of me that were buried and repressed, not because I chose to do that consciously, but because it felt too intimidating for them to be seen in the world. Like, what are the repercussions of that side of me being seen? Will I be left alone? Will I be pushed aside? Will I be seen as a monster? And I'm not trying to make everyone, in every conversation start spilling, crying and shouting and cursing everyone. But we all have, I do hope that we can all find in some relationships, even with just one relationship, moments where these sides can also be seen. And then the weight is being experienced. And then you are what you are. So I find for me that honesty, also what I'm doing now, like I'm sharing these sides of my story without you asking for them, but I feel that you did ask for them, or you created a setting by assuming something that I did not see myself as following, like this calm sir. And you gave me an opportunity. And these opportunities I see more and more in conversations. Is this person that is in front of me really interested in seeing me? Or are they interested in glorifying me? If they wish to glorify, fine, like I'll let them do as they wish. But as I've met you and I know you a little bit, I have a deep sense that you're interested in the depth of the story and what we can reach in this dialogue. So here is an opportunity. So I would pause you, which is something I would never do before. I would always let everyone finish. And I say, wait, perhaps if we look a little deeper into this, you could see that I am as imperfect as anybody else.
Yeah.
Always monitoring my temper. Yeah.
Right on. Nor would I expect that to be the case, that you are this, of course, consistent, peaceful and calm being. I appreciate something that came to my mind when you were talking there, which actually only complements where I was going with the idea of practicing so as to stay within the contentment or perhaps this authenticity of self to enjoy the experience as best we can, is that it is a practice. And I'm sure you've put in a lot of practice because of the dance and the embodiment of it, and then to integrate that with your theoretical studies in psychology, I'm sure the marriage there is outstanding. And then for, let's say, the listener to this podcast who is later on in life and hasn't engaged in psychological inquisition nor a practice of embodiment, and perhaps they do live their life in a theatrical sense, in that they put forward something that they would like the other to see of them, but behind, we all do, of course we do, and behind that is turmoil or despair or authentic joy. And we have this guy who's talking about being content in the now. Do you think that there's validity in actually scheduling time to practice authenticity or practice? Maybe you can help me find the words better here, but to actually give time to being yourself, like we talked there, or I listened to you talk there about the weight coming from permitting these emotive states to come to the forefront, or perhaps there was a facilitation or an enabling of these states of being, and then a weightedness, and then an authenticity there. But without actually experiencing it, there wouldn't be a point of reference so as to know this from that. And that perhaps there is a necessity to, I'm going to schedule time or allow time to practice. I suppose in relevance to our conversation, it could be in that of a movement-based practice or an embodiment or a dance, or maybe you have more to add to the conversation. So let's say, for example, I see you talked about your workshop and that you like it always to lead to the practical and not stay too long within the exchange of language. So I'm kind of doing the same here. If that we did have listeners to this and they wanted to engage practically in getting to a place where they can be content from the now to the now, would it begin by a type of How would it begin, do you think? How would a practice like that begin?
Thank you for the question. I have several leads. Yeah, I'll share how I started my last workshop in Berlin.
Right on.
It was usually when I do a workshop, there is a local producer that is familiar with the local crowd. This time in Berlin, I didn't find a host or producer for the workshop, and I decided to try to do it alone. And it was not a great success sales-wise. Like there were only 4 who registered, and the studio even offered me to cancel because they knew it won't be profitable. And I said, well, actually, maybe it's a good example. I said, at this time, for me, the workshop was, I was really in a difficult place with myself. A lot of self-hate and
Is this close to the breakup?
it was, yeah, my ex contacted me after a long time, not talking together. And it was hard. I was away. She was experiencing difficulty. I didn't know what my role is as no longer her partner. It was challenging. And somehow teaching always gives me clarity. And it gives me, it basically shows me that all my doubts are not hindering my ability to connect. And even more so, when I feel there is a chance to connect, it brings the life. It fills me with life. Okay, so the way I started this, so I decided to go on with workshop and to do it despite not having many who registered. And sometimes I say a few words when the workshop begins. It's really just a few words. And this time, I sat there in quiet and I wondered for a second. No, actually, I wondered for a long time. We started the workshop 10 minutes late, and I played a 10-minute song so I could think if there was anything valuable that I have to share before we begin. Because what I always say is like, okay, we don't know each other, so there is nothing to talk about really. Let's move together. And, but this time, I listened to the song. It's a new song I found. It's a guy playing a guitar that's really beautiful. And the people were doing whatever they were doing. Then we sat together and I said, thank you for coming. I want to say just one thing. There are no mistakes. Let that be your echo, my echo in your difficulties through the workshop at least. You can take it to life if you wish, but for the workshop. And it's needed because in my workshop, you always feel like you have no clue what you're doing. As very often happens to me in life. I'm clueless about what I'm doing, and still I do. And through doing, clarity comes. So that is really key for me, that I do not have to understand what exactly is happening, even if I don't take all the considerations into account. Still, I'm able to act, and echoes will come back on whether this acting was conducive to my growth and to my well-being or not. The reason I'm saying this is that I don't think we need to make time for that as much as to understand that the predicament that we find ourselves in is not a mistake. There is no one to blame for it. It's not that we need to recalculate how we're living or that this person has to pay for it. There is a bigger order of things that I cannot grasp. That is how I see things. And I see this not through a certain dogma or a preaching that I found compelling, but rather that by trying to live the other way, of trying to say, okay, this is a nice coincidence, this is a horrible coincidence, I'm just tired of saying coincidences because I don't find it anymore. Everything makes sense to me now, like whether it's difficult things, whether it's nice things and lighter things, they all have their space. And if you find, I'll say about myself, when I find myself in a struggle, instead of saying, okay, how can I get out of this? I'm like, okay, this is not for no reason. What is going on right now? What is going on inside of me? Do I feel something? Do I want to say something? Do I want to do something? And maybe it's just feeling what is going on. But feeling or observing or speaking or acting, they are all in the realm of doing that allows for connection, the way I see. Whereas assuming that this is a mistake is the only thing I recommend not practicing. So it's really through whatever, whether you are making tea or talking with a friend or reading a book or driving the car. Maybe that's also, we'll explain a bit more what I do in the workshop. Everything is physical, man. We live in a body. Everything that we do must be physical. And I'm not so much interested in the extremes of physical performance because the extremes are within all the time. So it's a question of, can I communicate through this body, whether it's vocally, whether it's by touch, whether it's by simply standing on the ground and the chair that I'm sitting on, looking at the sweet potato growing its leaves, listening to the beers through the headphones and looking at you. It's all an embodiment. But we do not need to speak of embodiment to be embodied. And we do not, and this is where I take my workshops, I do not want you to think that you are dancing. Because if you think that you're dancing, then you act to dance. If you stumble into it, and there is music that you might find appealing, and there is a temperament that is at the moment being experienced through your body, any move that you do is a dance for me. And so in this way, people can dance through life without questioning, am I a dancer? I don't know how to dance. These are irrelevant. You understand? The most interesting movers that I've met were not educated in dance, were not professional athletes, were simply people. And the more I observe interactions through this prism, I find there is beauty in every people, and also in the ones that cannot be. I mean, no, man, you can certainly. There is, I mean, rocks, okay? I see dances in rocks because they are in a certain setting, and as their setting is alive, it pours into them. So say in my private sessions, my treatments, people say, okay, am I to be passive? I'm like, you can try, but you will never succeed. The interaction is going on whether we take care of it or not. It's just trusting that it is there, and then things nourish us. That's what I find.
You said so many good things there. I'd like not to skip too far past what you said about not pursuing the extremes, because as I heard you, if I heard you correctly, life in and of itself, the living experience is extreme enough.
Ooh, certainly, sir.
Yeah, that's what you're saying. That's so right on, man. And then you got me thinking, I wonder, again, just based off what you provoked in me, are the pursuit of these extreme physical acts in a way an avoidance technique of the extremity, or how extreme life in itself is? You think I'm onto something there, or have you already arrived at that?
Yeah, absolutely. You're there. That's very much the case. And look, let it be stated. Again, I will repeat this as I repeat this for myself. There are no mistakes. If someone took the road of extremities, that is the road that they are to march. At some moment, they will find that this is not needed. Perhaps this is the way to live. And I'm no one to judge if this is right for them. Only indication of whether this is right for them or not is in their body, and that is
right on.
It's not accessible to me.
I heard that, because Go on.
Yeah, I can say that for me, I wondered for a long time what is preventing me from reaching some extremities. Say an extremity of anger. I am very rarely angry. And I was angry with myself for not being able to be angry. And again, I keep on finding that there are no mistakes. So I say, okay, perhaps there is a reason for that. And as I stopped trying to understand why am I not angry enough, moments of anger started to appear. Yeah, I don't see, perhaps it's strange to think of anger as something desirable, but I'm interested in the whole spectrum of human experience. And as I see so many people expressing anger around me, and as that part is not very easily accessible to me, then I question, like, how can I reach it? And what I'm trying to say is that as I stopped trying to reach it, it started to reveal itself. And this will also perhaps explain my practice, is that it is through giving space to what is already being expressed, the parts of us that were shy to present themselves start to peep in to what is possible, and to start to kind of find the way into our just daily life.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't challenge people to go necessarily, say if they're extremists, to go mellow, or if they're mellow to go into the extreme. I just say, you do your thing and trust that you're not doing it for no reason. And just be open to see if perhaps what you followed as your way to live for a long time, just ask yourself if this is still serving. As I do this daily. And the more open I am to see that I change all the time, then my way of living shifts adapts to that. As it happens in nature all the time. We have our sides that are can see the sun more easily, and there are sides that are more in the shadows. But these shifts, with the seasons, with the time of the day, with the relationships that we find ourselves in, and also moments inside these relationships have an extreme continuum of emotions and feelings, and being content and being very discontent. So these are all colors to this prism that are essential.
I hear that loud and clear. I like this idea of what you just touched on there, of if there are times at which you are interested in something that could be considered extreme, to honor it and to follow it, but also there's an honoring required for when it's time to get off that train and it has done its serve. And perhaps it's like, for me, what was coming up, there was times where doing lots of martial arts was important, and then there was times where the pursuit of the handstand was important, and then there was times where there was a conflict, and the conflict was basically just accepting that this isn't interesting or important to me anymore. It's time to move on to the next. But the conflict wasn't in the doing. The conflict is in getting off the doing and changing the doing. Almost like, well, I've committed to this, so I'm gonna stick with it. Well, why? I've got what I wanted out of it. Perhaps I can come back to it and go on to the next. It makes me think, though, like what came to my mind, I don't know if you've ever heard of CrossFit, which is like competitive weightlifting, but they've made a games version of it, so it can become like a tournament or a competition. But then I wonder how many of the competitors, I could be way off now because it's not a culture I've actually investigated, have got into lifting weights as a means of getting into their body and improving their general well-being and fitness, and then never got off the train and end up inside these games where there could have been a conflict somewhere along the line going, I got what I needed out of this now let me go further explore this other interest. And I'm sure then there's people who are completely themselves when doing this act.
Yes. So, okay, what happens when we introduce a high degree of effort to our practice is that in that moment of effort, it's very hard to listen what the body is actually saying. So we can feel the adrenaline rush later on, and we can observe that we have, say, accomplished a challenge, or I don't know, moved on to a higher weight or more repetitions, or say we are improving. Okay, I have not been practicing CrossFit. I just treated people who do, also mountain climbers, and I'll speak from my experience because that's what I know. When there is effort in doing, there is some inner conflict, and we often struggle through it because we see it as a challenge. And I question that, the necessity of that, and also the profit of that. Because the inner conflict is in itself a prize. It's a gift. It's an opportunity to do something a little differently. It's an opportunity to give space to us. The inner conflict is us speaking, but we try to push through that. And sometimes people, when they use a lot of effort, they scream, and they scream to silence what is inside. Maybe I'll link it to my workshop. There is a what we do in the workshop is not physically challenging, but it's mentally exhausting because you keep meeting yourself. And in that, it becomes so frustrating that you're doing hardly anything. Like, you walk in the space, you sit down, you lie down, you lift a friend, you push and you pull, you ask permission. Again, this is all physical. It's not, but it's daily things that you do anyway. I'm not teaching you to do anything that you don't already do, but I can show you how much effort you invest into doing what you already do. And that effort is embedded in you thinking that you're not enough. And you can say, why? I think I'm enough, but I'll show you that you don't. And then when you experience that you can do the same things that you do regularly with so much less effort, then something in the solid perception of I know how I live my life and what is best for me starts to space out a bit. And you might find that some things that you're doing are not really serving you. You might find that some things that you found you are incompetent in, you're actually very competent. And it's just your doubts that are added on what you are already accomplishing. So I find value in spacing my solid ideas and allowing fresh input to enter. That fresh input can be from other people that I meet. It can be from walking in nature. It can be also from within, because the spacing allows for what is within to rise to the surface. And meeting people, for me, allows me to see that what rises from within rises in everybody. Mm-hmm. Some people are more aware of it, some less. But man, I see myself reflected in every single person. Mm-hmm. There are a king or queen, and when there are a homeless person. The difficulties are all the same. They come in different forms and shapes, but the connection is one. That is like, so if you allow yourself to experience these difficulties and these questions, and you go one layer deeper, you reach connection, and then there is no doubt. There is nothing that you need to connect, or you don't need to speak about oneness. You don't need to speak about beautiful things. It's just what it is. And that is, for me, the most nourishing way of being. So when I'm in doubt, I used to isolate myself and to find a solution for my doubts, I tried to use effort. I tried to use judgment. I tried to use any tools that I was proficient in. And when I realized that these tools are not serving me, I started seeing a way in being with people. And that's immediately the idea of isolation vaporizes. It's like, okay, we're really all in this together. So
Here.
yeah.
Right on, man. There must have, like, I imagine that, like, in these periods of doubt, to conclude that withdrawal is not so serving and to be amongst others in and of itself may have been effortful, or perhaps there was an authenticity to it that made it effortless. Can you speak about that just maybe a small bit?
Sorry, can you explain again? I'm not sure.
So you mentioned something quite profound there, in that in your own doubt, as opposed to a previous habit of withdrawing, you realize that the withdrawal is not serving in these moments and states of doubt, that in fact the connection to others would be more serving. But imagine that there would be a layer of resistance. Again, this is my imagination. Maybe this is actually another effortlessness that is a truism, in that to conclude as such that the connection is worthy of moving towards it in this state obliterates the resistance. Perhaps it does, or maybe it takes practice to move through the resistance to connect and away from the withdrawal. The fact that you've arrived at an antidote or the medicine for doubt is not withdrawal, is to connect. I'm sure there's going to be multiple listeners that are going to be like, that's deep, man. That's good stuff. Like, you know, so I mean, like, if we could all come to such a conclusion that withdrawal into our own doubt is a cue to connect, then I mean, you're onto something there. If we can all practice as such or conduct ourselves in such a way.
Yes, look, okay, I want, thank you for these words. I want to augment this in reality, because it sounds like I've had some awakening of a sort. And it's important for me to stress that there is no, as we said about being content, or as you beautifully once told me, that your self-practice is being in a state of love. It's very, very important for me to stress that this is not one moment. Yeah, it's I think I can link it to my fear of teaching and how I got into teaching. So for a very long time, since I'm, say, I don't know, 10 or 11, I've felt an urge to lead in some way, and a great fear of leading. I was terrified of misleading people, of taking them into places that are dangerous and are just not for them, of using others to explore my whims, not intentionally, but unintentionally. It's happening all around. So I was afraid of contributing to that. And it took a long time until I used to teach repertory workshops of dance companies that I worked with. And from time to time, I taught ballet and contemporary dance. And I started my workshops actually from a more physical point of view. I have a good eye to see where someone is using effort, and I can propose them functionally to find a way with less effort in their way of moving, not necessarily in my way to move. But then, and again, it's not an aha moment, it's just from a continuous observation of trying to follow a certain path and asking, does this work? Does this really work? Does it work now? Not in theory. Right now, is this serving this person? And the more I looked into it, and the more I tried teaching through the physical aspect, physical in the sense of giving a physical help to reduce effort, the more I found that this aspect is nice and it's nourishing, but it's quite limited in time. And I found that what gives a longer or perhaps a deeper effect is you realizing how you are creating the effort yourself. And it's not the surrounding that is making the effort. So that is an internal mechanism that we keep on applying without noticing. To use more effort because we think that what we are already is not enough. And of course, we get this feedback from the environment in our culture all the time that we need more. That, yeah, you know, everybody knows, I guess, that it is through being afraid of teaching and trying one way. Even though it was terrifying at first, and even though I didn't find my way, through doing, I started to get answered. And doubts were very present. But I realized that they are not, I do not need to have no doubts in order to be able to give. So it's through doubting myself and still stepping forward and trying to propose the best I have, I started to develop my courage to share what I have right now. And this is not in order to someday have a complete system or method. It is just for me to free myself of being secluded in my own ideas and remote from the most nourishing thing that is connection. So I should say that this practice of connection, I get a lot from practicing Tai Chi with a partner. So I have a teacher that teaches Tai Chi that is formless. It's really just connection. And yeah, I find I've been practicing with him for the past 4 years, and I found it has contributed a lot to how I'm able to communicate through my difficulties. Because if I will say, look, man, I cannot be here right now. I need to work on my issues first to be deserving of your company, which is how I used to feel. You know, I would have something important to share, but I say, this is not ready yet. I need to work on myself and on my ideas better for them to be ripe to help anyone. And I do not trust this idea anymore because it's wrong. Whatever we have to give based on our life experience, not based on what we read, this is irrelevant. Based on our own life experience is so much more profound and nourishing than we imagine. And it doesn't even have to be right or right for everybody or panacea for some ailments. It doesn't need to be that. It's just us speaking through our life experience. And that is felt. You feel when someone is speaking from it. And it hits home. And then I know it for sure. My main intention is not for anyone to see what I see, but for you to understand that the things that you see are not wrong. And there are no mistakes and you see them for a reason. So communicate them. And whether it's right or not doesn't matter. It will show you what is right for you. You will feel through your body as you converse, is this the actual thing that I wish to converse? And if it's not, it will find its way to reshape and reform, and it will be alive. It will be a live knowledge of you, which is absolute beauty. And that is the only connection that I find value in through conversation. The reason I don't choose verbal conversation oftentimes is that few of us are courageous enough to speak in that way. We find a very strong need to augment our findings in science, which I I'm not an enemy of science. I learn a lot from it. But say being in the academia world, I could find professors of psychology and neuroscience that research the most profound of human experiences, but know nothing about them from their own experience. So I'm like, what is this? What is the worth of this? If you do not live by what you study, there is a disconnection there that I cannot support really.
Right on, man. Yeah, there's so much to be said for a person like yourself who can integrate from a deep place both.
But we all can.
Oh yeah.
Yes, we all can.
Okay, I'll honor that, but I'll also go and say, like you started earlier, something along the lines of not to be depicted as some enlightened being or something along those lines. And it makes me think of this Plato's allegory of the cave, in which we're all born effectively ignorant, and along the way we get bits of light so that we can establish new points of reference and see the world anew. So from this, you have received an element of light that some wouldn't have not, in that of the dance movement, and some light in that of deep inspection of the psychological realm. And your ability to integrate the two gives you a substantial ability to give light to another person to show such a way, going, look, oh, have a look over here, there might be something of value to you over here. So, but my point being that your worldview and your experience is valuable to those around you, including me in this conversation, in that you're able to point out things that are perhaps not necessarily obvious, but true and authentic, which probably speaks to you going, we all have this, but it may take a conversation or a workshop or a particular dance to start arriving at these conclusions or these places of contentment, to consider them value enough to revisit, so to speak. And just to continue, go on, have you something to say?
Yeah, no, it's good. Yeah, I just want to say one thing. So I respect I respect what you say, but if I come back to this notion of there are no mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
The reason that you find that I can do these things is that I can stop now and look back at what my 31 years on planet Earth have taught me, and to look with this prism of there are no mistakes into my own life experience. And that is what it feels that what I am sharing perhaps is being augmented in my own self-knowledge, because it is. I'm not making this stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
Experienced struggles and I've experienced beautiful moments. And I base on this entire pool of life experience, as the reason I'm saying everyone can do this is that we have all been on this planet for quite a while. And what separates us is our ability to look back and to say, I could have been a better person had this not happened. But this scenario is only fictional. What happened had to happen for us to get here. So even if there were difficult moments, still there is light in them. They are the reason we are who we are now. All I'm asking is to act from the place of who you are now by acknowledging what you had experienced in the past, not by wishing to fall on that or in finding reasons in that, but just know that this whole experience, the ability that you've been able to survive through all these struggles, can give you the diploma of man, I've been through some rough shit, some beautiful moments, but I lived through all of those to become who I am now. So it's the less we say this moment, this part of my life, I wish to never go back to. That's a pity. And I understand there are serious traumas that we try to move away from, but it is only by the integration of them that we're able to be fully who we are. And I really find that the only thing we're trying to do here by conversing is to be fully seen and heard. And that is very difficult if we ourselves are not willing or afraid to see what we are and who we are.
Yeah, what I hear you saying is like appreciating that everything is already perfect because there isn't an alternative. The proof is that we haven't experienced that there isn't an alternative.
Yes, and also that the power to act, to change what you find not right in the world will come from embracing what you've gone through. This gives you power to act now. And this is what I'm interested in, not in going back and fixing anything, because I really think there is nothing to fix.
Right on.
The fact that we've been through some struggles and some difficulties, and we see that there are many wrong things in the world, seeing that allows us to be able to step into them and to change what we think should be different.
When you say to step back and fix anything, we're obviously not talking about time traveling. Are we talking about the idea of like a talk therapy to bring up old traumatic events as a means to reconcile, and that rather there are perhaps what you're suggesting better methods to utilize our previous traumas in an integrative fashion?
A hug.
Yeah, a hug. Right on, man. Central to our conversation seems to be a doubt and effort, and acknowledging in them both, but maybe moving beyond or through them. Are they, do you think, byproducts of trauma? And then I just want to pre-clarify trauma, because I think the term trauma is gaining traction, maybe mainstreamy traction, and being used as a exploitive tool, like in that we're talking about mild to extreme physical or emotional events in a life that has perhaps augmented our structure or the way of seeing the world. Now, you're the one who has done lots of research, I think, in this realm of trauma and that. So I'd rather you be the voice to perhaps pre-clarify what we're talking about when we say trauma.
I'm pretty sure you're familiar with the name Gabor Mate.
Yeah. I'm delighted that he's getting so much attention of late. I watched his movie, The Wisdom of Trauma.
Right.
I found like a lot of the term trauma itself has become frustrating to me just because of the amount of people I've come across who I get the impression that they've been exploited because of this term. I've learned of yoga teachers talking to their students and just not helping at all, pointing at something and saying that's because of your trauma, and then leaving it at that. And I think you're inducing, you're furthering this lack of self-worth and making heavier this self-doubt, and you're not serving a person, but you're almost like forcing them to a subscription model, and that you stick with me and I'll show you the way. But it'll perpetuate in that I'm going to keep you, let's say, traumatized so that you can continue to pay me, or pay me whether it be financially or pay me with your subordination or whatever it may be. So trauma in that way has kind of frustrated me in that it's being exploited. But also I'm glad that the term trauma and Gabor Mate, his works and these ideas of compassion-focused interventions are gaining proper traction, so that we as a society can have a proper conversation about probably our traumatization as a whole. I think we're living in a traumatized society. This isn't just my thought. This seems to be what Gabor Mate is proposing. Each nation seems to be have their own types of traumas, and we seem to all embody like a cultural armoring that is a byproduct of trauma being passed down. So I think, like, now that we're onto it, I think we're at a time in which, as a whole, we have an opportunity to interconnect through this technological means to perhaps integrate our traumas and utilize them as a means to probably, like we're talking about, connect and heal as a species together. Now, I went on quite a bit there, but I think you speak to it. I think your practice holds what I'm talking about quite central to this. Am I right to say that?
I don't even recall what I replied as a hug, as an answer. like what was your question that this led to this answer? But a hug, I wish to go back to the hug.
Right on.
Or to bring another one in. Another key element that guides my teaching is that through living the life that each of us is living, we are not experts for a certain topic, but we are experienced in our way. And this goes through many realms and disciplines that we don't see ourselves as professionals or as very knowledgeable in. So say a patient comes to me with okay, I'll just go to Gabor Mate for a second. The reason I mentioned him is that he coined a very well-articulated phrasing for what trauma is that trauma is not what happened to you, it is what happened inside of us, inside of you as a response to what happened to you. So it's not the life event, but rather the internal reaction to it. The reason I'm mentioning this is that internal reactions are happening all the time. And it is in safe surroundings, in safe environments that these internal happenings have room to be experienced. So say I have some things to say about trauma, but I put them aside for a second. I say, regardless, because I do think we all have kernels of trauma as being live beings on this planet. That is a planet that is being manipulated very forcefully by unresolved emotions of leaders. But let's leave that aside for a second. The point is that you, the man or woman who is listening to this, and I and you, Robbie, we all, everything is already inside. Yeah, the story and also the resolutions of the story, but they need a certain setting to be revealed. And that setting is one that is safe enough for all of us, the entirety of us, to be expressed. And when it is expressed, it receives feedback from the world. And when you receive feedback, you realize you're no longer isolated. But unless there is a setting that allows for different sides of us to be seen, trauma can be talked about, can be verbalized, but it cannot be fully healed. So I go back to the hug and I say, if you're hugged by someone that is dear to you, you can feel yourself in that hug and it becomes evident that you're alive. And in that moment, all trauma that is still there, I'm not saying it's resolved instantly, but it is, it can breathe. It is no longer a locked chest in the basement that is heaving us down to, it keeping us away from life. It keeping us away from showing what we think must be hidden. So, and I say hug because through human contact, we go back to the most basic maternal connection that is giving us the feeling of safety. And of course, some of us had a more difficult childhood or upbringing. Maybe some were hugged less, but we all have something. Okay, I'll even take the hug aside. we all have something in the current setting of our life in which we feel safe, in which we feel comfortable at least. For some, that will be going to nature. For some, that will be a crazy crowded city place with a lot of noise around. And that is also okay. I'm not saying, no, get accustomed to nature, because unless you're wrong. You're right to live the way you do because there is a reason for that. Remember, there are no mistakes. If you find yourself calm and open in a surrounding of whatever it is, feel your body when you're in that state. That's all. That's all. Be aware that things are happening. Even if you don't have a manuscript to understand all of them, you don't have to. But as you feel that there is something moving inside, resolution can be reached in time. And if you will find that you need help of a professional to do that, then go ahead and do that. But as things are moving inside, it will become clear when something is serving you and when it's not serving you. When, I don't know, just things will move. And as they will move, you will find yourself where you need to be. I think that is the main thing that I wish to say about trauma. All of us have a kernel of trauma in us, and each of us has a certain setting that allows us to feel safe. And in that feeling of safety, healing can occur. And that is not a certain setting. That is what you feel safe in. And yeah, okay, I said enough about it.
You did, yeah. That was really good, man. It's almost like the hug from your environment and or the hug from another can offer that place of safety where the trauma can be moved and integrated as such.
Yeah.
That is so good, man. One of the questions I was going to propose before calling an end to our conversation was like, what would be a call of action that you could propose to our listeners in such a way that they would maybe integrate some of what we talked about? But I think you did quite well in suggesting knowing a person. Like, don't let me prevent you from answering the question, but maybe I'll just add another answer or something I've got from this is that knowing where you feel safe is in of itself a very good place to start.
Yes. Yes. And if that is no place that is currently in your life, I urge you to try different things that are not currently in your life. Because having a place that feels safe, a place that feels like you can rest as you are, that is where life happens.
Right on, man.
The practice that I or say my goal in teaching is to expand the horizon of the places where we feel open and safe. So it really, in time, if you practice this, and again, it's not one practice, it's just, yeah, okay, maybe we're onto something. I have doubts. I always had, and probably I always will have. But acting and connecting despite or next to these doubts, I find that I can give and be open and receive, of course, also in scenarios where I have doubts. So the doubts are present, but they no longer shake me as much as they used to. They don't make me abort mission completely. They don't make me introduce effort into what I was trying to do, but they allow me to just be and to try again and to try differently. So I'm constantly engaged in whatever is going on. And then as I'm engaged in an effortless way, but still trying, not knowing necessarily if something is going to work, but trying and trying differently, the more the horizons clear, and I can see that there are infinite ways to do things. So if one way is blocked, there is always another. what happens to us when we get very augmented in a specific way of doing things, if that way is blocked, whether it's for an accident, whether it's for a difficult moment in our life, then it feels like we're completely shut out, or we have to, we're gone, we are disconnected completely. But if there are multiple ways for us to feel safe and open to what is happening, then difficult events will not be able to disconnect as easily. Still, it might happen, but there are more chances for us to still be connected to life through also difficult moments. So please don't try to push away the doubts or to wish for a moment where you're doubtless. If I would still not be teaching. The reason I'm able to express myself also vocally now, which I was not able to do, say, 5-6 years ago, is because I tried despite the doubts. And first, my voice was very shaky. Then it was very apologetic. And now I feel quite comfortable saying things that perhaps are right for some and not so right for others. But I do not have to give and take back. I give, and it's received wherever it's received in whatever way. And that is not in my control.
Bravo, man. Right on. Maybe it's time we bring it to a close.
Yeah.
Almog. I told you that I have a partner in this project, in our connection column. If you would be so willing, perhaps we could have a conversation again in time, the three of us, because Colum is quite similar to me, but also very different to me. And he'll bring his own questions that are always quite fruitful. And I'm sure, like, should you grace us again or grace me again and the audience again, the conversation could go a multitude of directions, probably based off the seeds we've planted here in this one. So consider this an invitation to come back if you would be so willing.
Very much so. Can I say one more thing?
I'd love to. Yeah, of course. You could say all the things you like.
Most of us have become accustomed to a way of discussion that is a role play. It is now you give and I receive. Now I give and you receive. But in reality, that is not so. Say, when you are listening to me now, you are giving me, you're giving space, but you're giving me your presence. Without your presence, my talking now would not have been possible. I can tell you that, say, if I were to sit now here alone and voice my thoughts to myself, none of this would have been articulated the way it was. So it is our thoughts making us think that we have a certain role. And some roles are more active and some roles are more passive. But that is not so. So in communication, my teacher makes a very beautiful distinction in my eyes. If it's communication that we're interested in and not interaction, then communication is constant. Yeah? So we are engaged in communication. And the reason I mentioned this is because, say you think I have given you maybe some things to think about in this discussion or some nice ideas, and I have shared my time with you. But if we do not part this into roles, we've shared time together. And the more I allow myself to share time with people without questioning who is doing what role, the communication reaches a deeper level. So what I wish to say here is that we have been communicating and it's been very nourishing for me as well. So you facilitated space for me to speak without judging myself, which is very rare in my reality. So I wish for all of us to acknowledge that we are constant players in this game of life and know role is very well defined. So if we put the roles aside, you are Robbie and I'm Almog. We come with our life experience, and at this moment in time, we share it, and that's a beautiful thing.
Agreed.
So that's it.
Cool, man. I feel just as nourished every time I interact with you. It's a nourishing event.
Likewise.
I'm more of me, perhaps, for being with you.
Awesome. And I find, really last thing, this is not done with my intention for you to feel more you.
Mm-hmm.
Me allowing myself to express whatever comes up. That's a very powerful realization for me, that I do not have to take into account everything that the person I'm communicating with is going through. I cannot see all the hidden layers, but I can just be me, and that gives space for you to be you, and that's marvelous, really.
Beautiful, man. Almog, this was an absolute pleasure, my man.
Likewise.